Dr. Thigpen, I want to come to you for a second. I asked a question of our listeners this morning, and I'd be very interested in your opinion. I got some notes here that I made last night preparing for the show. We would argue that it's fairly clear what the modern liberal believes in. The modern Democrat, which is, a guy who believes that government should indeed involve itself in the ills of the world, that the government needs X number of dollars to do X number of solution-based governing. That's kind of the liberal philosophy in Washington today. They want money to do good. They sincerely believe.
Good as they see it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In their judgment, they believe that government needs to do certain things for certain groups of people. So we kind of understand where today's Democrat Party is. Trumpism, the candidate, the president that is Donald Trump, once again, you can like it or not, but it's fairly understandable that a lot of his messaging is Washington hadn't looked after the common man. We got to get back to business about the people, the regular rank and file American person. I'm not saying Trump has gone down that road or hasn't, but in essence, that's what he believes in. That's what the Trump supporter believes in. What does the Republican Party believe in today? I look at the $1.3 trillion omnibus bill, and I understand that there's a 60-vote majority you got to get on appropriations bills, and the way the Senate works makes it real difficult to get those sorts of things done. But when you look at the three forces in American politics today, the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, and Trump, whatever Trump is, so it's pretty clear what the liberal believes. He believes in government-based solution governing. We understand what Trump kind of stands for and the followers of Donald Trump. When the Republican Party has the majority in the House and the Senate, they control the White House, and they pass a bill that adds more to the federal deficit than any bill other than 2008 and 2009, how do you honestly look at a Republican and say, do you believe in fiscal sanity? Do you believe in being the party of governing and governing in a more responsible fiscal manner?
Well, one of the big arguments on the Republican side has always been that we are the party of fiscal responsibility. We're not big spenders. We're looking out for the citizens' tax dollars. We don't need programs of every variety, like you say, to cure every ill out there.
And that's why a lot of voters make a determination to become a Republican.
It was the biggest thing, with me.
But you can't argue that they're that today. You can't argue they're the party of that.
You cannot. The Republicans have squandered that argument, and they haven't got it on their side anymore. Let's face it, one of the reasons I was all kind of worried about Trump was that he wasn't a limited government conservative. I mean, he was about as far from Thomas Jefferson as you could possibly get. And since he's been president, presidents can't spend money. Only the Congress can. But on his watch thus far, he has been in favor of spending from A to Z.
He's been financially irresponsible.
In my view. Now, there are other people who are going to say it doesn't make any difference about budget deficits. I think somebody even said this week, one of these commentators, nobody cares about budget deficits. They really don't care about fiscal responsibility and looking out for the average tax-paying citizen in this country.
What motivates a Republican voter to go to the poll if you don't really know what you're voting for? I think the liberals have made it fairly clear what they believe in. I disagree, but I think they're fairly clear in articulating what they believe their party stands for today. And with Trump, I think you understand, in essence, what you're voting for. And the only answer I can come up with for reasons to vote for a Republican, they're not a Democrat. And to me, that's a pretty lousy reason and will lack a lot of motivation in getting people to come out and support a political party.
I think a lot of Republicans, particularly those in the Congress, felt that this tax cut would be a gift to them going into the 2018 cycle. Whether it will be or not, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But and then the Republicans got other problems out there on the hustings. How close do you stick to Donald Trump? Some places you would be helped or you wouldn't, let's say, be hurt. But other places, it could be curtains for you. And trying to walk that fine line, because let's face it, a lot of the votes that the Democrats are going to get is anti-Trump vote.
Correct.
And as I say, a lot of it is unassociated with policy, in my view. It's on his temperament, his pronouncements, sort of the shock treatment that he's given the American public in terms of his governance in the White House, his language.
Something we're not accustomed to.
Something we're not accustomed to. And I think a lot of the pushback that you're going to see and in favor of the Democrats has got to do with him personally. And if you looked at policy, I mean, listen, I love tax cuts. If they're not irresponsibly put in place, I don't know about all this protectionist stuff that he's put in place. It's hard to tell how that's going to impact on the economy. But
Rod, I want to go to you and ask you this question, and I'd be interested in your answer, and it's probably unfair because I didn't give you any warning about this question, but as a Democrat, what sort of Republican would you worry about running against? I mean, if the Republicans, to Dr. Thigpen's point, if they were the party of fiscal sanity and responsibility, there was a contrast there. You got one party that believes in one thing and one that believes in another, and you've got to market that idea. You got to market that philosophy. As a Democrat, what worries you if the Republicans did find their soul and came back to some coherent, rallying cry? From your perspective, what would worry you heading in to the 2018 and then the 2020 presidential if the Republicans found their soul and did what?
All right, I'm thinking about a number of issues that I think the American people agree with this on. First off, I would think, let's just start with, like you mentioned, taxes. The Republicans pushed through a huge tax bill, but who got the benefit of the tax bill? Corporations. And you and I have talked about that, which, they didn't need it. Corporations were doing great. Stock market was up. They didn't need it, and not many of them passed that along to the workers. I could see somebody running and say, look, we didn't do enough to help the middle class. I'm going to advocate cutting taxes for the middle class even more to help drive the economy on the local level. It's a Democratic issue. We got to do something to help those people more. Gun control. If you have somebody that comes towards the middle, say, look, I'm not for banning AR-15s, but I think we need to expand background checks. I think we need to make sure that we don't have loopholes like the Charleston massacre loophole. I think we need to ban bump stocks. So in other words, you come a little to the middle on that. I think you could sit there and have somebody, quite frankly, I think this trade war hurts the middle class because it's going to raise prices on consumer goods if there was. I think that's an issue that's a Republican. That's the Republican issues, free trade, and I think people understand that. I'm trying to think of some issues that you guys could move towards the center on. Now, saying that, I talked to Neal's going to talk about this in a minute, an individual that's running for Congress. What is his name, Doc? Bill Hopkins. He's a lawyer from Myrtle Beach. And I told Bill Hopkins, I said, if I'm running against Tom Rice, I'm going to run, you got to run to the center. And you got to talk about those issues and pick off some I'd call them common sense Republican people in Horry County. Pick up enough votes there, but you got to do it by talking about family issues. Here's a picture I would paint. If I was a Democrat running against a Republican that worried about this, I bought a book on Bobby Kennedy that Chris Matthews wrote. On the inside cover is two pictures, and it was both taken of people waiting on Bobby's funeral train going from New York to Washington. There was a white family there, and in the next picture was a black family. The white family, the husband had on overall. The wife was a nice-looking wife, but she had on one of those long dresses that look out of the 1930s. The kids were barefoot, standing there, obviously working people, lower middle class working. And here's a black family there dressed in working clothes. And I said, that's your Democratic voter that we have lost. We've lost a candidate. We have lost that white working class people. So that's what to me, that's where the real battleground is.
But let me tell you one that the Democrats can run on that used to be exclusively on the Republican side is family values.
Yes.
Particularly what's going on with President Trump and all these women accusers and talk of adultery and this kind of thing.
And nobody's coming out to criticize him in the Republican Party.
If I were a moderate Democrat running in some congressional district, I'd not be darned if I wouldn't talk about it.
But you don't criticize Trump, Ken. Like I said last week, the media is, well, I'll tell you what, listen this morning. You were on air, but I was watching Good Morning America, and the lead story wasn't that they got that budget passed through at the last moment. The lead story wasn't that John Bolton was named as the National Security Advisor. What was the lead story? His 10-month-long affair with a Playboy model, and she broke up and started crying and said, well, what would you say to Melania? And she apologized to Melania for having a 10-month-long affair. So in other words, that stuff, you don't, as a Democrat, you don't need to run against Trump because there's something bad attacking him every day.
But in essence, what Rod's talking about, the family, the working class white family that's standing there with the African American family, they aren't a Republican voter, but they are a Trump voter.
Yes.
I mean, in some way, shape, or form, Trump's message resonated with those people. That's my concern of the Republican Party. The only figure in the Republican Party today that excites people to any degree is Donald Trump. So you've got to accept the reality that he is the leader of the party, and he's the only. Do you really believe that Paul Ryan can travel the country and generate excitement for the Republican Party, or Mitch McConnell, or any other Republican? And that's what I'm concerned about as a Republican who likes the Republicans to be in the majority, no matter whether they squander opportunities or not. And I guess I'm one of those guys who says the reason I'm going to vote for the Republican is he's not a Democrat. That's a pretty lousy reason, but I think I'm in that camp today.
What do you think Paul Ryan, in his heart of hearts and his quiet moments, thinks about President Trump?
I wish he was out of town on the first thing smoking.
You bet.
And Mitch McConnell, the same thing. There's not a Republican other than a few members of the Freedom Caucus who like Donald Trump being president. And the only reason they like
Jordan's
Trump,
a big advocate of him.
The only reason they like him, Rod, though, is because he's a contrarian. He's somebody that disrupts and causes trouble, and that's kind of right in those guys' wheelhouse. But what I'm arguing is, as a Republican, somebody who ran as a Republican, you're an old hand at Republican politics. I look at the party and I'm going, what do we believe in? What do we stand for? We can't say we're for immigration reform because we've never done anything in regards to it. We're beholden to corporate interests who want to skew and manipulate the labor market. We can't say we're for fiscal responsibility because we're not. We just passed the biggest budget, and the president will sign it into law.
And didn't question it one bit.
None at all. None at all. And I just wonder, as much as I worry about the Democrats gaining control and a more liberal agenda, and that scares the daylights out of me, I just wonder what in the world would motivate anybody this election to go to the poll and saying, I'm voting for a Republican because I believe he'll do X, or I believe he'll do Y, or I believe he'll do Z. And you can argue with the president. We can disagree a lot about his behavior and shenanigans. And Jernigan talks about his affairs. I mean, that aggravates me as much as it does anybody. But there's a story there. There's a reason to vote for him or against him. And I think the Republican Party has become very lukewarm. I just don't think anybody is very excited about anybody.
Look at the Republican turnout in some of these early primaries. Terrible. The Republicans aren't coming out and voting. Let me tell you what Charlie Cook says, and I
he's
know
good. He's good. Really good.
Charlie's I live and die by Charlie Cook. He said that there's two things that motivate people to get out and vote: hatred and anger. He said in 2016. They were on the Republican side. This time around, it's going to be on the Democratic side.
No question about it. I can't disagree. We'll take a break. We'll be back after the break. Takes Mondays to make Fridays. Good Morning PD, Live 95, brought to you by Dixie's Federal Credit Union.